In the interest of time, we're going to jump right back in, and I'm going to introduce our next faculty member. Scott Schultz has served the nonprofit community as an executive consultant and volunteer for more than 40 years. He has worked with nonprofits of all types and sizes in communities across the nation. His work has always been driven by his philosophy that management, marketing, and development must be integrated in order to ensure mission success. Schultz & Williams, founded in 1987, has turned this philosophy into a successful business model that encompasses strategic business planning, marketing, development consulting, direct marketing, and staffing solutions. His background and experience on both sides of the desk have helped Schultz & Williams clients benefit from an integrated and effective approach to problem solving. Incorporating both proven strategies and the most cutting-edge solutions of today, Schultz & Williams stays ahead of the trends to meet the growing demands of an industry in which one size does not fit all. Scott is an active speaker on marketing, fundraising, and nonprofit management. Among numerous awards and other recognition, he was named Fundraising Executive of the Year in 2005 by the Greater Philadelphia chapter of the Association of Fundraising Professionals, and Philadelphia Direct Marketing Association Direct Marketer of the Year in 2010. He did his undergraduate and graduate work at the University of Buffalo and enjoys mentoring the next generation of nonprofit leaders. He currently serves on the board of Mission Kids, a children's advocacy center in Montgomery County, PA. Scott, we are very happy to have you as you present Planned Giving Stewardship, Staying Connected. And as a reminder, please there will be a 10-minute question and answer session immediately following the presentation. So please submit your questions for Scott through the Zoom Q&A portal. And now, Scott Schultz.
Oh, my phone just rang, so somebody's calling. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me today and for doing the conference here in a virtual format. I want to give my acknowledgement and congratulations to the leaders of your organization, because this isn't easy to do. It's hard enough to do in person, but it's even harder to do this in this format. So we will try to do this all within our time span and probably have a little more time at the end for questions and answers. Please feel free to submit them, and I'll have plenty of time at the end. I just want to say I hate those introductions, but thank you, Colleen, who I've known for many years and admire and respect. You have a great group of the leaders of the Planned Giving Council. I'm probably the comic relief for your organization, because I looked at the roster, I looked at the participants and the people who are on your faculty, and I am not a planned giving expert. Oh, sorry about that. Don't know what that is. Glitch. I'm not a planned giving expert. I think all of you are. I looked at your resume, your titles and information about you, and you've just got such an incredible group of people. Philadelphia is very fortunate to have so much expertise in this community. In my early years, and you kind of got an impression there for how long I've been around. In my early years, I went to all the requisite workshops and seminars on planned giving. I remember going to great workshops by Conrad Teitel and John Brown, who were not only experts in their field, but they were showmen, and they really built a desire in you to learn more about it. But they were also gave us guidance and advice that this really required a dedication to becoming a planned giving fundraiser, deferred giving, they called it back then. And that it would require being single-minded. And I went in the other direction. I realized that, okay, that wasn't going to be me. So I've tried to stay in touch with it. But I'm going to talk today about just one of the elements of planned giving, that crosses over into all fundraising activities, and that's donor engagement and stewardship. I'd like to start out by putting this into some perspective today, because we're living in a different world, aren't we? So we'll go to the next slide and just give you an idea of what I'm going to talk about today. Let's talk about the world we live in because it's pretty hard to ignore it. I'll give you some examples of what we're seeing as a firm and what we see moving forward, because we've been spending a lot of time on how the crisis is impacting us. Our firm is trying to look forward to the recovery and what will happen. You can't do that and not pay attention to the hardships that people are facing right now. And then we'll end up with some kind of key takeaways in moving forward about stewardship, about how to stay connected with your prospects and your donors at a time when it's nearly impossible to stay connected through anything that we've done in the past. So I'm just going to talk about, put it into perspective first, and then move it forward. The world we live in, you all know this, and you've probably been talking about it for the last 9 months. But it all started back in February, didn't it? When the market corrected and everybody got very nervous in the fundraising world. Ironically, that didn't last long. The market came back pretty suddenly. And of course, it's at almost record levels now. But it was like other market corrections had been. And on the basis of that, we could see how that would have an impact on if it was going to create a recession or not, and how people would use their assets for charitable giving. So that was predictable. Then along came the pandemic, which was clearly unforeseen, or at least the people who should have seen it didn't say anything to us. But the pandemic has wreaked havoc around the world. So now we have an unknown, something we haven't necessarily had to deal with at this level before. And from the pandemic, it created a recession, and we don't know how long or how deep the recession is going to be, or if it's going to come back again, or what's going to happen to the recession. But we've been through recessions, and we know that recessions fundraising will take a hit during a recession, but it will have a lag effect, and it will also come back. We've seen that trajectory over the years, and we could have every reason to believe that will come back the way it always has. But it impacts fundraising, right? We've also had some new issues. The murder of George Floyd jolted all of us and awakened the country finally and to racial injustice and systemic racism. That's been hard to deal with, and it's taken also as a fundraising perspective, simply a perspective is that people are putting money, as they should, into fighting racial injustice. That is going to be something that's out there as fundraisers. Is your organization committed to diversity? Is your organization checking off the box that has a plan and a program? So it's another issue that we all have to deal with. Of course, the political turmoil, I don't know if that'll be over in 2 weeks or 2 months or whenever, but it's been unprecedented. I've started out in the political realm, in government and politics, and there were some knockdown dragouts. There's never been anything like this before. Although they say that Abe Lincoln ran some nasty ads. I'm not sure of that. And of course, we also have, what's happening at the climate. Another issue that is devastating certain parts of the country, different parts of the country at different times, from the Gulf of Mexico to Sonoma in California. So we have so much going on, and that's my point. As fundraisers, these are things that we have to consider. We have to understand that there's a lot of people who've been affected by these issues, and we have to respond accordingly. Move on, please. So some people will tell you, as I just did, oh, we've been through this before. We've been through that before. We know how this is going to turn out. No, we don't. This is not a time for business as usual. This is a time for us to be creative, to innovate, and to really buckle down as fundraising professionals. And in your business, there are both challenges and opportunities in the planned giving realm that I want to talk about. But certainly, this is a time when you have to have plans, and you have to have plans that have different scenarios baked into them. What if there is a vaccine in December and people can get back on the road again in January or February? What if that doesn't take place? What if you're going to be remote again for another 6 months or 9 months or a year? And what if this is the new normal? What if this is how we're going to communicate? And, everybody is going to be, wearing one of these. And it's not the same as it's been to go into somebody's home and to chat with them about their family and their relationship to the school that you represent or whatever organization it might be. So things are certainly going to be different, and it is no time to just assume that everything is going to be back the way it was. So let me tell you a little bit about what we've been seeing. I've kind of compartmentalized the nonprofit organizations that we work with and that we see in 3 different categories. There are those that are thriving, there's those that are struggling, and there's those that are absolutely fragile right now. Let me just kind of quickly go through those. The thriving organizations are at the heart of it. Those organizations have increased their demand for services. Obviously, they're frontline workers, healthcare, EMTs, food banks, Meals on Wheels program that I've worked with for 33 years in California. They're organizations that are trying to keep up with the demand for their services. They've increased staff, they've increased operating expenses. The crisis has provided visibility that they never dreamed of before for their organization, put them right out in front. And raising money has not necessarily been the issue. They've brought in a lot of new donors, many of them over the transom. But I just want to make a point. That is that they brought in gifts. They need to bring in donors. That is one of my personal mantras. You don't ask for a gift, you ask to get a donor. We want to treat the donor in such a way that we get the all-important second gift. And from the second gift, we put them into the continuum of renewing and increasing their support, maybe becoming mid-level donors, and then major donors and plan giving donors. So this is the group that's thriving, but they have to hang on to the gains they've made, and they have to be prepared to do something with all the new gifts that they've received. A lot of those were spontaneous, they were transactional, and as we all know, they have to be relationship-based, or they're not going to renew that pipeline. Some organizations are struggling. They had to basically shut down. They had to hit the pause button. They're museums, and I have a lot of clients that are zoos and aquariums. They couldn't bring in earned income, which in some organizations is 90% of their operating budgets. They couldn't welcome people back. People, when they did welcome them back, were somewhat afraid to go there. One of the things that has maintained those organizations are their membership programs. Their membership programs where people have maybe joined for the benefits, that they've stayed for the mission. And those people have renewed, but it's a hard process to make sure that you can continue to expect members to belong to organizations that they can't go to. So that's slowly opening back up again. People are seeing the impact, but these organizations, they suffered badly. They see the light at the end of the tunnel. The stories, empty symphony halls, empty museums, organizations like that really had to shut it down were not on the public eye. People weren't thinking about them, talking about them. So that's why stewardship is so important to the prospects of the donors in particular that they had. They had to stay in touch with their audiences through remote activities. And some of them have been very creative and very innovative. And we'll talk about that in a second. And then there's the third group that's very tough group to talk about, and those are fragile organizations. A lot of smaller nonprofits, mid-sized organizations had to completely close down, had a complete suspension of services, probably laid off their staff or most of their staff. Their traditional funding sources that they could rely on were now focused on the crisis. They weren't considered essential, and it was really up to them to reach out through and to their boards to make sure that people were paying attention to them, but they've had to restart. And there's nothing more difficult than stopping and then restarting again. And these organizations are going to be looking at closures that may be permanent, maybe mergers, acquisition with other organizations, or their major donors are going to come to their rescue. But they're still going to have to make up for a year of not building their prospects and their contributed income, to say nothing of any earned income they had. So a few things that just want to add to the mix of, I know this sounds like law school, you know, we always go back to the beginning, but there are fewer donors today as a trend, but giving more money. So last year, for instance, when I guess the number was about $440 billion raised in this country, though that came from fewer donors. And that most organizations today have been benefiting from the market, people giving out of their assets, people generating funds from fewer people, but because of the cost of acquiring a new donor, they've been hesitant to invest in the cost of acquisition, so their files are getting smaller. That scenario is not going to last forever. And that when something like a market correction does happen, or we have a pandemic, all of a sudden the base is smaller. And you all, as plan giving experts, I think are going to be particularly concerned about that, because as we know, a lot of your plan giving donors don't come from major gifts or people with high net worth. They come from individuals who've been loyal, frequent donors to an organization, and those files are getting smaller. I think it's disguised, fundraising in general, by the incredible rise in donor advised funds. And I know that all of you work in that area. And also in mega donors, high net worth people giving much, much more. But that means that they're very rich, you know, are getting richer, and they're supporting organizations. But the income disparity that we see in society parallels the disparity that we see in fundraising between general support and major gifts. The other thing, last thing, is multi-channels of communication and fundraising. You know, there are so many ways to communicate with people today. We all have to be expert in everything. And as I said, that's why I'm not an expert in plan giving, you have to be dedicated. You have to be focused. You have to learn dogs do have to learn new tricks. And it requires investment and new skills for fundraisers. So as we bring new people into our profession, they're going to arrive with different skill set than old dogs like me. The last crisis, even though I said not everything is a true precedent, but we do know that organizations that waited too long before they spoke with their donors, organizations that stopped talking to their donors altogether, they stopped, and others just stopped asking for money. Those are the organizations that have taken the longest to recover from the 2008 period. And if they were able to fully recover at all, it's because of the rise of the market and the stability, at least, that we've had for the many years. But a lot of organizations stopped talking to their donors during this process. And that's most important step in maintaining their interest and their support. So I just want to cut one more sort of set of things to just talk about. I asked my people in Washington to kind of take a look at how major donors were responding during this pandemic, because we had campaign planning studies going on at the time. And it was interesting that donors are responding enthusiastically to requests for meetings via phone or video conferencing. Donors are deeply interested in hearing how a nonprofit is navigating what to know and how to help. They want to help. They're connecting in very real and emotional ways. They're telling their own stories about what the pandemic or the crisis has done to them. And they're asking questions about the organization. They want to know how the organization is pivoting to serve the mission and the stakeholders. They want details, and they want to know what the organization is doing to maintain sustainability for the future. Their donors are thinking about the post-COVID period, and they want to know how you're framing the future for your organization. Individuals are generously repurposing their gifts so the dollars can flow to general operating support. And of course, foundations are streamlining their grants process to get more money out faster to support organizations, and generally in an unrestricted fashion, more than they've done in the past. And finally, corporations are increasingly focused on their giving on fighting systemic racism. So a lot of shifts, a lot of changes. And how does that affect all of you moving forward? So, as I said, we're trying to focus on the recovery, not all of the problems we have. Go ahead, please. So this is your moment, and I really, really believe this. I've been in this business for a while, and I remember when we started talking about the transfer of wealth that was going to occur somewhere around 2020. There was going to be an incredible trillions of dollars of a transfer of wealth, and a lot of that was going to support philanthropy. Well, I don't think we've ever hit those numbers completely that we were projecting back then, but I think this is your moment as plan giving people. I think that there's opportunity obviously comes from every crisis. And I think you are going to be able to make take some positive steps in building your donor base through plan giving now in ways that you wouldn't have been able to do before. Once we get through this pandemic, and as I said, people are giving a lot to general operating support, being unrestricted, people are going to start thinking about the future again. For those of you that are building your endowment or having maybe an endowment campaign, I think that your donors are going to work with you to consider the possibilities of failing if you can't meet another crisis. And so, and there was a trend a few years ago, especially with a lot of younger, new, high net worth people not to give to endowment, want to see the money spent right away. But we have to have a rainy day fund. We have to have an endowment, a base that will protect our organizations in the future. I think your plan giving prospects are going to understand that. And for organizations, loyal, frequent givers, organizations that have a great file of those people, they've supported you through their lifetime. They're going to want that to continue. So I think your plan giving programs are going to be very, very well poised for future success. Right now, kicking off your plan giving program should be step one for every organization. Now, I know you're already doing that, but we got to get that word out to the boards and to the presidents and the CEOs and the donor community that your plan giving program should be, if not one of your top two programs in the institution. Also, you should be taking advantage of this opportunity on the ops side to make sure that you have your data cleaned up, that we're not mailing to the wrong people. And we know who our plan giving prospects are. I know you're constantly looking at that, but people have been focused on different things right now. Go back to this, get serious about it. Look at your business ops, look at your database. People are concerned about things like privacy protection right now. We all know what that's been doing in our field lately. They want to know that you understand who they are. You want to get their names right and their data, their fundraising histories down so that you can crunch that data, segment those files, and know who those people are as you take this out the next level. If you have a strategic plan, it's time to refresh it. If you're in the middle of a new one, it's time to complete it. Your strategic plan is the essence of your case for support. A strategic plan right now shouldn't have one destination, one outcome, one vision. It should be based on multiple scenarios. I think we're involved in a lot of strategic planning. We're all trying to think of scenario A, B, or C. And then there has to be a business plan that supports each of those. So we just think that as part of recovery planning, making sure that your strategic plan is up to date is very important. So finally, to the thing I'm supposed to be talking about. This is the time for every organization that's serious about its plan giving program to double down on stewardship, to make sure that you are speaking to your donors regularly, because this is about engagement. It's about building lifetime relationships with donors. And that's a two-way conversation you have to have with them. It's not just you talking to them, it's also you listening to them. So let me just go through a couple of thoughts. I've always said the donors are like grandparents. Grandparents like to know that people are worried about them, and they like to worry about their grandchildren. They want to get information, and they want to get it on a regular basis. They might not ask for it, but they are very interested in knowing what's going on in the family. Sometimes they feel left out because they're not in on family planning activities. Well, your donors are the same way. And if your donors have 5 or 10 organizations that they support on a regular basis, they're going to pay the most attention to their organizations that speak to them the most. So treat your donors like you would your grandparents, if you're lucky enough to still have them. It's going to be about messaging and storytelling. I can't emphasize this enough. Getting your messaging down, being creative about your messaging, and telling stories about how the crisis has transformed your organization, and telling stories that go back to your mission pre-pandemic. You don't want to use data. You want to tell stories. Stories are truth. And we can do that in a number of ways, which I'll give you a couple of examples. You want to take advantage of your organization's own marketing and communications activities, advertising, all kinds of marketing that you do on a regular basis. You need to take advantage of that. You had to be aware of it in your stewardship work. Your donors are reading the paper, they're reading social, they're paying attention to what other people are saying about you. You have to integrate with the other marketing communications that are going on in your organization. And you need to talk to your marketing communications people to influence the messaging that they're giving. We have been lucky enough to be involved in a couple of organizations lately that are kind of pre-campaign, needed to raise some money because of the pandemic, but went through a process of looking at what their case is going to mean going forward. One of these organizations is one of the great human service organizations in Philadelphia. It's called JEVS. You probably all know of JEVS. Maybe you haven't heard of JEVS. You've seen the work that JEVS has done. And in the workforce development and working with people with disabilities, it's an incredible organization. And they probably have a campaign in their future. And what we've positioned them with, along with inside, not we, together, combined, is that their marketing is so smart, their communications people are so great, that they are looking out to talk about being on the forefront of the recovery, so that where healthcare workers and security and police, everybody has been carrying the load during the pandemic, they're going to be the ones who get it next. The people who've lost jobs, who need to navigate a process that is already difficult to find work, to get meals. Their clients have individual and family needs that are great. So one of their positioning statements is let's get to work. It seems very simplistic, but there was a process that we went through to get to that line, because that's what they do. They help people get to work, and it's time to get to work. That messaging is going to go out through their organizational marketing and communications, as well as by the fundraising professionals there to their donor base. They're a great organization. Recognize the constituent groups inside your organization. It could be staff, your board members, volunteer groups. You need to create customized communications for those people. Look, everyone wants to know what's going on in your organization. I know you want to get them to a planned gift, but you're not going to do that until you've reached them emotionally and made them feel more hopeful and more certain about the future. And you know, those transformational, those spontaneous gifts, they all come in when they see a food bank brings in money when people see pictures of food lines and people, you know, going around the block to get testing for COVID. The healthcare workers benefit from that, and the groups benefit from that. Everybody wants to know what you're doing about that now, and then they want to think about the future. Your constituent groups, the people closest to you, we sometimes don't communicate with them as much. There's interesting studies have been done on data where people take their mid-level donors out of their stewardship programs because they want to personalize them more. So everybody gets the newsletters and the general social and the emails that the whole group gets, but they're holding off here on their mid-level people. They don't want to fatigue them. They want to coordinate it better. And they're also, of course, looking at their major donors, and they are doing that on a one-on-one basis. Then the mid-level group ends up getting nothing. You got to look hard at your segments. And those are people that are, you know, it's top down, inside out. You've got your board, you've got your volunteers, you've got people who are within groups. If you're looking at, let's say you're a children's hospital and you had a run or a walk and it's been an annual thing, you couldn't do it this year, right? There are people inside your database. I know one children's hospital has 60,000 event donors. And those donors don't give to other things. They give to the events. So now all of a sudden we didn't have the event. You got to talk to those people. Those people are playing giving prospects. If they went to the event every year for 20 years, they are prospects. And you need to talk to them about the event and why it didn't happen and what you're doing about it and what you're doing inside your organization. So look for customization to certain constituent groups that you entertain. You got to know your donors and prospects. Do you? I mean, that's a good question. And I know this sounds like ancient history, but I remember back in 1995 when the tech bubble burst. And it was interesting because at the time, everyone was doing a campaign. Things were good. It was a gravy train. Everybody was making money. Everybody felt good about it. And then all of a sudden the bubble burst, boom. And I remember my late great partner, Jane Williams, and I kind of sitting back and analyzing what was going on. And it was interesting. We were much more bullish and optimistic about campaigns than some of our clients thought we should be or could be, because the difference in donors, we had a 55-year-old group of a 50-year-old, I should say maybe, lawyers and financial professionals and people like that who'd done very well in this market. Now all of a sudden bust, and they get to work for a living for another 15 or 20 years. They were not the people, and you know, they made up a lot of the boards and the donors to independent schools and places like that. But the 75 or 70-year-old donors that we talked to, they'd been there before. You can't mess it. They were not concerned about the future for those institutions. They'd been there, they'd seen that, they knew the market was going to come back. They were calm about it. You can't market to those groups in the same way. And you have to know your donors, you have to know your prospects, and you have to try. I always say that during a major gift program that every ask is a campaign in and of itself. I think to plan giving is the same process. And I think that you have to know your donors, you have to know what appeals to them, and talk to them in the language they appreciate. Multi-channel communications. You can't reach people one way. We've so sophisticated today with our communications. It's going to be, go ahead and put all those down there for me, if you will. There's digital, your website, of course, is all important. If people talk to you, they're going to go to your website right afterwards. The emails you send, the video attachments. I'm the biggest believer in video right now. We saw our client international campaign for Tibet did a simple iPhone video with all of the people that worked on the staff of that organization. Just saying, holding up signs that said thank you. And that simple little video done on iPhones, pieced together, done in people's homes because they're working remotely, was a powerful video to their prospects and to their donors, saying, thank you for being there for us. I think the handheld video done on your iPhone is going to be one of the most important tools you have as a plan giving person. You can create them simply. The simpler, the better. You don't need to be, a film producer to do a video on your phone. They're authentic. They're real. You can do them frequently. And I want to emphasize, as an old advertising adage, is that, you want to get either reach or frequency. Everybody wants both, but you have to pick one. You want to pick frequency. You want to get to your people with the right messages, and you want to get them to them with some frequency. Direct mail, of course, is still an important, the most important probably plan giving tool. With letters, we like to include a lot of engagement devices for people so that they can demonstrate their support to the constituents you serve. Even your newsletters today, they're still being read. Matter of fact, people are saying right now, anecdotally, that people are reading their mail more than they ever did. They're home, they're receiving the mail. Hopefully, if our USPS doesn't get shut down over the vote, the mail is still a very powerful tool. Handwritten notes. Sit down to your top 50 donors and get a handwritten note to them. They will, and I know, and you'll see my last bullet is old school meets new school. I want you to use video. I want you to use your web presence. I want you to use email, digital campaigns. But don't forget the old school tools. A handwritten note is powerful. And depending on if you're one of those organizations that's thriving or struggling or is fragile, you can pour out your thoughts to the person and you demonstrate that you're sending them something special. And they really are going to appreciate it. We've seen a lot of responses that come in later through a planned gift for people who received a series of handwritten notes over a period of time. I have one client at a zoo in Ohio that one person, their very competent director of membership and development, made 500 phone calls over about a 3-week period to their top membership categories. Left messages, of course, but people also who picked up the phone wanted to talk. There's no solicitation. This was just to say what's going on, what our plans are, and how are you? It's a two-way conversation. So stewardship at its most basic, you want to make sure that you are communicating as frequently without fatigue. I realize that, but don't under steward if there's such a thing. You've got to reach people more often than you think. I'll go ahead. In addition to your communication devices, we've seen some great exclusive access programs and opportunities. The Museum of the American Revolution here in Philadelphia, wonderful, the great museum without a legacy that the Philadelphia Museum of Art has, for instance, as somebody explained to me, new and national. They shut down like everybody else. They have increased their programs. They're reaching people through emails. They're doing curator talks. The CEO is talking to people, and there's exclusive access to that. There are people that they're reaching out to they're list building with it, and they're reaching people who have want to stay top of mind, right? And that is a terrific program. You can do private tours virtually. Again, I can just imagine a iPhone video being done of a tour of maybe of a emergency room that was subject to overcrowding and very sick people from COVID that's now settled down a little, but maybe there's a tour showing people what the press has been talking about with ventilators and PPE and those types of things. And with the message being, we're ready for the next wave. I mean, if it happens, we're ready for it. And that's just saying thank you to the donor, right? And then, of course, video events. If you're an orchestra or a dance company or whatever, you're not going to get an audience there right now. Do it in video, and so you don't have to sell tickets, but you'll reap the benefit through contributed income down the road, especially through your Plan Giving program. Years ago, I did a project with a partner at Juilliard, and it was interesting. We had a mid-level associates program. And the mid-level program had benefits, and the benefits was you get to come for the student rehearsal. But over time, they realized that if people came to a rehearsal, their retention rates were over the top. But if they didn't come to a rehearsal, they didn't renew. So back then, they started calling people, and if you didn't come to a rehearsal, it was just a simple phone call. Sorry you didn't make it. It was a great event. Hope you can come again. But it was not a solicitation. It was simply stewardship of that donor. The people who took those calls ended up renewing at the same levels of people who'd been to the rehearsals. So that's the power of stewardship. So it ended up, next thing is getting back on the road for you, right? It's getting the donor prepared for that. It's starting to insert information that we hope to see you in person soon. It's possibly creating small group events that you will do that virtually, of course, but in the future, as you start going out, you might not get into people's homes. You might do small groups. You might be outside instead of inside, but start to share with your donors the possibilities. And at some point, we all have to follow the guidelines to the letter. But also tell people that we miss them too. We want to see them, and as soon as we're allowed to, we will be back with them one-on-one. But with that said, you've got to be sensitive to the situation. A person could have had COVID in their family. A person could have lost their jobs. Listen as much as you talk. Learn. Make sure that you record the data. So you know where that person is and get back to them in the future. So finally, I think I'm about on time here. A couple of takeaways. Remember that we're not looking for gifts. We're looking for donors. We want to treat people that way. I know we get measured every day by how much money we raise, but we're looking for people with whom we can build relationships, who we can engage, and feel like part of our family. And that's what we're looking for. And there's a lot of tools available for you to do that. Secondly, donors do want to hear from you. They are not cringing at hearing from an organization that they've been supporting financially for years. On the contrary, they're your grandparents. They want you to communicate with them. They want to know what's going on, and they want to be there for you. You also need to be transparent. You have to tell them the truth about what's going on. You have to make sure, though, that when you do that, that you're not, people don't give because you're needy. They give because you're successfully meeting needs. That's what you have to communicate with people. And that's what stewardship should be all about, is being successful as an organization. You, at this stage, in the world we're living in, you don't want to make it look like you don't have needs. I mean, I think of a zoo, had to close. They still had to take care of their animals. They had no visitors. They had 90% of their revenue was once earned. Now it's got to be contributed. That's a true story, but they're also taking care of endangered animals. Their conservation programs, their mission, it continues. That's successfully meeting needs. It's a fine line, but my advice, and I've been this my whole career, is not to act needy, act successful, and because you're doing the right things. Be creative, and make donors feel special because they are. So anyway, that's about it for me. I don't know if you have any questions. I have been intentionally general because I'm not one of you wonderful plan giving professionals who know how to close a deal and know a donor advice from a charitable remainder trust. Those are things that you can do at the end of this process, but you or somebody in your office needs to be doing the stewardship to set you up for success. And I hope you'll take that seriously. And I hope that as we wind down and we start reaching some semblance of normalcy, we will all, as we start to recover, thank our donors over and over and over again. You can never thank anyone enough. So with that said, thank you. Back to you, Colleen.
Thank you, Scott. Well, right now there are no questions in the queue. So let me give a reminder out to attendees. If you have questions, please feel free to put it into the chat or the Q&A. And while we wait for that, Scott, I actually have a question for you.
Okay, we got it.
So during the presentation, you mentioned double down on stewardship without fatigue. So can you comment more about that line? Where is that line that you're crossing over that it might be too much communication? And what signs should should we as fundraisers and gift planning officers be looking for to ensure that the level of communication is appropriate for our constituents?
Yeah, that's a great question, and there's no set answer, right? How many touch points does a person need? It depends on the person. It depends on their relationship with you and how engaged they've been in the past. But you have to listen, as I said, as much as talk. And you will find the fatigue thing is if you hear from people, I can't really talk to you about this right now, or I'm not, I can't do this. You have to make a note of that. You got to put it into the system. It's like moves management, and you got to make sure that you pull back. You can use some of those responses as a general overview of everybody else, and you can pull back a bit. You can also do, because you're doing things on the web and you're doing things online, you can check the responses. You can see how many people are opening your mail, what they're looking at. You can do a lot of analytics to find out if people are getting the message. You can also do surveys, Colleen, and you can ask people that question, about how often they want to be communicated with. But I wouldn't start there. I would try to build interest and awareness first, and maybe come back to that. But I really think we can take it pretty far as long as we're multi-channel, as long as it's not a piece of mail every week. Or an email, 3 times a week. Mix it up. Make sure that that you're reaching this person through several channels, and try to spread it around. And we all know the data is there that a person is more likely to respond if they've heard from you both through mail and digital than through just one of those channels. So also just know how old your donor is and what cycle of life they're in. It's hard now too, because a lot of people, we used to communicate with a lot of people in their offices and things. We'd send them things there. You can't do that now. You can't necessarily reach them. So it's not, there's no hard, fast formula that says after 3 times they don't open your email, you might want to put them in another file and try them later. But it's about touches. And so experiment and see what you get.
Thank you, Scott. So there aren't any other questions right now. So if you have any closing remarks.
None, just thank you. I think that you guys did a great job, and with the conference, I hope everybody, I was looking at all the wonderful speakers you have in such a varied subjects. I hope everybody gets a chance to do this. And maybe the last thing is, I probably should have said earlier is don't be afraid to ask now. If you've done your job and you've read your prospect, there's nothing wrong with asking now. People want to give, and it doesn't matter if it's an outright gift or a planned gift. We're seeing people respond, and they want to help now, but I think that this emphasis on not having to go through this again is really going to be important for planned giving. And I think that you are in a great position to help ensure the sustainable futures for so many nonprofits. So it's all good.
Well, thank you, Scott. So a question actually popped in as you were making those comments, and it's from Suzanne Barton. So we had a speaker earlier today talk about sending out pre-call materials as a warm-up, letting the donor that a call would come. And you spoke about the director that was making those 500 stewardship calls, that were just picking up the phone and call. So she's wondering about those two different approaches, the warm-up versus the colder call.
I love the warm-up. I think that that's a great idea, and you probably want to do that with your top prospects. You know, it's hard to get in, as we all know. We don't all answer our phones anymore, right? It's harder to get those calls through than it used to be. I think the warm-up is a absolutely intelligent way to get in, so they'll take the call, they'll know why they're calling. We're actually using something new as well, which is an email with a video attachment that says we are going to be calling. And that's, I hope, like the pre-call letter, it might be an email. And we do a lot of emails that tell you that a letter is coming your way. So it would be the same principle.
Well, I think that is the last question. And now, with everybody working from home, my son just walked in the door, so apologies for the background noise there. The school bus just popped in.
I was on the phone with a guy the other day, had a cat crawling around his head, so he didn't know his video was on. It's all good. Thank you very much, and good luck to everybody.
Thank you so much, Scott. Thank you for such an insightful and terrific presentation. So this brings us to the end of our session today. I would like to quickly acknowledge and thank our sponsors again. This conference would not be possible without your support. And thank you all for joining the Planned Giving Day conference today. And I hope you're all looking to celebrate National Estate Planning Week, which ends this week on the 25th. So we look forward to seeing you again next Wednesday when we welcome Timothy Proser at 1 p.m. and Nathan Stelter at 2:30. So until then, have a wonderful week. Thank you all. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.